It's another week, Elizabeth, and it's a time for Fancounters.
Yay!
Yay! I had an interesting time over the weekend.
What'd you do?
I thought I would just lead us off and just get this story out of the way.
Okay.
So we had a normal family get-together, and dinner was lovely. And we get home, and all of a sudden, put the kids to bed. I'm just about ready to go to bed at like 11:30.
Okay.
And I'm hearing rustling from one of my daughter's rooms. And remember, they're 5, so my twins. And so she gets up, and she's just like, my tummy hurts. And I'm like, oh, not this. Not like right the second I was going to go to bed. And so I was like, oh, sleep it off. I'm like, best thing to do if you're sick, you got to lay down and go to sleep. It's my always go-to line because I don't want to I don't want to deal with it when I'm trying to sleep. And that's the thing. I'm a really good dad, but man, don't interrupt my sleep. Don't get up in the middle of the night because it's terrible.
I've never had
cranky.
a child sleep through the night, ever.
Oh, wow. Well, then
Yeah.
I have it really good. But so anyway, she's getting up every 45 minutes or so. So I'm kind of to the point where I'm like, all right, I'm just going to play on my phone and wait for the next time for her to get up. Because every time I get ready to fall asleep, Daddy. And I'm like, oh, geez, what? So I go in there, yes. All right, so 1:30 in the morning, I'm finally like, okay, I'm going to go fall asleep. So I hear her door open because I wake up to any little sound. And she comes in my room, Daddy, I really think I'm going to...
Oh, fantastic. It's just like in Parenthood. I don't feel good, Dad. Okay.
Right on the side of my bed.
That's what it was
She's
in that
standing
movie,
right in front of
Parenthood.
me.
See, you should listen to her when she said she didn't feel well.
I think it was a 24-hour bug because she ended up being fine like all the next whole day, but...
Only one?
Only one what?
Only one twin got sick?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, nobody else did. That's why I think maybe it was something that she ate didn't agree with her or
Okay.
something weird because, like I said, the next day we were totally back to normal.
Huh.
But
Weird.
it was a long evening.
I bet it was. And Blicky.
Yeah, anyway, what a way to start the show, huh?
Yeah.
Welcome to Fancounters. Anyway. Okay, so let's get into the guest for this week. Brian Volk-Weiss is the founder and president of Comedy Dynamics in Los Angeles. Now, what do they do, you ask?
What do they do, I ask?
Well, let me tell you. They develop and produce and distribute and create not only comedy specials, but now they're doing some talk shows, some original scripted comedies, and some documentaries. And, why not, feature films as well.
Oh, my gosh.
Some of their recent productions include Kevin Hart's Guide to Black History for History and the newly scripted comedy about Johnny Carson.
I want to see that.
It's called There's Johnny. We're going to have to find out about that because they were going to launch that and it got pulled back, like the release date got pulled back. So I don't know. We're going to find out about when we can see that show because you know who's in that. Did you see like the previews or anything?
No.
Tony Danza's in it.
Shut the front door.
Yeah.
As Johnny Carson?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
No,
Because that's a stretch.
Who is playing Johnny Carson? We'll have to look that up before he calls in. This is a big day for us, too. You want to know why?
Why?
Because he's a Grammy winner.
Woohoo!
It's our very first Grammy-winning person on the show today.
Yay!
So, in 2016, Brian and his company won their first Grammy for the Louis C.K. special. All that and a former manager to such comedians like Dane Cook, Brian has spent the last 20 years in the industry, putting his heart into every show he produces. So,
let's get started.
you want to?
Yeah.
Okay, no more puke stories.
Thanks.
We're gonna go for real here.
Coming to you from nowhere near the entertainment capital of the world, this is Fancounters, the podcast.
You're amazing. You need to come to Hollywood. I'm going to make you famous.
There was this mob of people, and they're screaming my name.
Crazy fans.
Stop following me. Don't come around my house. If you do, the cops are going to be at yours.
I just had a fan get a tattoo of my signature on their arm.
Are you kidding me?
I continually will get stopped.
You were on Blue Bloods, weren't you?
Can I take a picture? We're gonna. Oh my God!
I definitely declined signing body parts.
Oh, I don't want to go there.
I'm the only one that's ever been on Sam Jackson and lived to tell about it.
That's why we call it Fancounters.
I don't think you're gonna last on the air very long.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Good. How about yourself?
We are great. Thank you so much for joining us on Fancounters. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, very excited to be joining you.
So, Brian, your story and experience is a lot different than the ones that we've already been able to tell with our guests who have been mostly actors in the industry and directors and that kind of thing. But you're a company founder of Comedy Dynamics, and we always find it best to start at the beginning. So just so you know, we're in Wisconsin, where kids really can't wait to tackle a big city. But you're from New York, but you chose to go to our neighboring state, Iowa, for college. So my question is, what were you thinking?
Yeah, who leaves New York for Iowa?
I will say this. I'll start with the end, and then I'll back into the decision. Quite possibly my favorite payoff to what was certainly at the time deemed to be a risky choice. Just being completely blunt, I knew college would not play a very important role in my career. So I knew it was more important for me to have an experience than it was to have the diploma. So that basically told me it didn't matter where I went. So I basically decided I want to go to a place that's a good experience. I had spent 18 years in New York. I knew I would spend the majority of my life in LA. And I was like, I want to see a different part of the country than what I've been used to or what I will be living with. And, I actually got into Madison. So, I checked out Madison. I checked out Iowa City. It was, by the way, it was a close call. It definitely could have been Madison. But, I just wanted to have a great experience and see a part of the country that most people that live out here or from New York wouldn't get to have. And I thank God almost every day that I did it because a lot of what I do to this day keeps in mind that the coasts of this country are not the whole country by a long shot.
Sure.
And I'm able to make decisions based on being very well aware of the fact that L.A., New York, and Chicago don't make the country move all by themselves.
So you studied communications thinking you'd become a film director, even though your family has 4 generations of dentists? Did you feel any pressure that you needed to be a dentist in your world?
No, I felt zero pressure to be a dentist. In fact, if anything, I was probably encouraged not to be. But I am, and how many people can brag about this? I am the first person in my family in at least 3, maybe 4, maybe even more generations to only have a bachelor's degree.
Oh,
so
no.
Everybody going back to the, quote, old country, everybody was doctors and lawyers and judges and everything. Yeah, I'm the first not to do that in literally over 100 years.
Wow. So you graduated from Iowa and then headed to L.A., and then what happened when you arrived in Hollywood?
Day.
The very next day, you wasted no
I'm
time.
out of here, man.
I basically was like, I'm going to go out to L.A. It's so funny. I barely remember what I did over the weekend, but I vividly remember my first day and first couple weeks out here. I came out here. I wanted to be a director. What I didn't understand about directing when I was in college was, and basically when you're in college and when you're making student films, you're directing them, but you're also producing them, and you're doing everything, but because you don't know what's what when you're in college, it just becomes a blur of jobs. So when I got out to L.A., after probably about 3 or 4 months, I realized very quickly that I actually enjoyed producing. What I thought had been directing was actually producing.
Okay.
And I started gravitating towards producing. The place where I realized this, by the way, is one of my big career, this drives me crazy. I was a production assistant in the wardrobe department on Castaway. And I did not get a credit on the movie, which drives me crazy to this day, almost 20 years later. But watching Zemeckis direct was literally the moment where I was like, picking shots and talking to actors and working on one project at a time versus 10 to 20 at a time that is not what I want to do. And then shortly after working on Castaway is when I began the path that would lead to producing and not directing. Ironically, I started directing again this year, but that being said, it was a good 19-year run of not directing.
Wow. That's pretty interesting. So soon, or what I'm assuming is soon into your Hollywood adventure, you met Barry Katz, who today probably has more of an extensive resume than he did when you met him, but you became his assistant, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And I would argue his resume was actually pretty impressive the day I met him as well. I mean, I don't think, obviously Bernie Brillstein was the first comedy manager. But I would say Barry was the pretty close runner-up for being the second comedy manager. So I mean, and this was before I met Barry, by the way. But at one point, Barry had a ridiculous percentage of the cast of Saturday Night Live as clients, and I would bet, and I could absolutely be wrong about this, but I would bet. Few people, if no manager, has ever had as high a percentage of the cast all at the same time as Barry did when he did it.
Wow.
So I think his resume was pretty good back then.
So what kind of jobs did you find yourself doing for him?
So it's very funny. It's very hard. I don't know how old you guys are, but it's for certain people, it's very hard to understand a world before Excel, a world before, when I met Barry, I had probably owned a cell phone for 9 or 10 months.
Okay.
So a lot of what I did for Barry would be viewed as a period piece now, if it were film. I was organizing, calls, like basically what Outlook now does. I was doing by hand,
Sure.
making phone sheets. I was copying one VHS to another VHS and then having it messengered to people across town. Stuff like that. Typical assistant stuff. I mean, absolutely nothing crazy or torrid or anything like that. Very, very basic assistant stuff.
Okay. And following that, while still working for Barry, you took the job of being Dane Cook's manager, which sounds like a pretty awesome gig. Did you envision yourself being in talent management while you were doing that? I mean, you were with him, I think, was it 12 years?
I started managing Dane probably about 3 years after I met Barry. And I just always like to be clear about this point. Barry had signed Dane, not me. So Dane was already at the company when I got there, and Dane and I just bonded over Star Wars and became friends, and then I eventually joined Barry as one of his managers.
But did you see yourself having a career in talent management instead of doing what you're doing now?
No, I didn't understand what a manager did the day I met Barry.
Okay.
So I was literally out of money. I had come out here with like $1,500, and I was just out of money, and I'd been interning for 6 months, working for free, which back then everybody did and was completely normal. And I would also say 19 years later, looking back, it was some of the most fun I've had in my life, was that first year of ostensibly working for free. But that being said, no, I was interning in a building where Barry Katz was, and all I knew was that I was running out of money and I wasn't being paid, and Barry was paying. So I took the job because I needed money. I didn't understand what a manager did. I love comedy, but I wasn't like Mr. Crazy Comedy. Literally about 2 weeks after I started working for Barry, when I did understand what a manager was, I was like, I don't really think this is for me. And Barry was like, what do you want to do? I was like, I want to produce movies. I want to produce TV shows. And Barry was like, well, as a manager, you can do that. And I was like, okay. And we did. That's what we did.
So when you started Comedy Dynamics, of course, it was first called New Wave Dynamics. The ideas and the experience you had from working with Dane Cook and Barry Katz, did that all play a role in you shaping that company when you first started?
I mean, not really. I mean, I would say Barry obviously gave me a phenomenal education as it relates to comedy and comedians. So, I mean, the reason why it's comedy dynamics and not horror dynamics or not, drama dynamics or documentary dynamics, I could keep going in genres if you don't get the point I'm making.
I get the point.
But was definitely because when I met Barry, he ran a company that was 99.9% comedy. But the inspiration for comedy dynamics, or what would become comedy dynamics, was I read this book that a guy named Jack Vaughn gave me called The Long Tail. And it's funny, I talk about this book a lot now because everything we've done was based on reading that book. But the funny thing is, whenever I talk about the book, and I'll get to what the book's about in a second if you're not familiar, but basically people are always like, oh, that's so interesting, I'm going to go buy it and read it. And I'm like, no, don't buy it and don't read it because it's 11 years old and it all is now in the category of, no kidding. The book is completely outdated now.
Sure.
But when I read the book in 2006, and you have to keep in mind that YouTube was basically just starting, but I had never heard of YouTube when I read the book. The iPhone had not come out yet. iTunes was just getting started. So what the book did was the book allowed me to look at the world differently, and it allowed me to, quote, unquote, predict the future. Now, obviously, I didn't predict it because I read about it in the book. So the good news is, thank God the book was right, and not that there's bad news.
Right.
But the book was completely right. And what the book said that I took with me was we were, for the last 500 years, anytime you wanted to buy something, one of the major variables was shelf space. Sure. You would have to go into a store, and if you sold something and the store did not agree to carry your product, if you sold chairs or books or telescopes or whatever, you were in trouble. I'd use another word normally, but I can't use it here. You were in trouble. You couldn't do that here. So you couldn't do that. So that limited how many people could make chairs or how many people could make telescopes.
Right.
What the book did was say that day is ending, and we are now heading towards a world of, and this is the thing of the 280 pages or whatever it is that I'll never forget that the guy wrote was, we are heading towards a world of unlimited shelf space.
Right.
And that was the thing where I was like, oh, instead of making specials and then selling them and being out, or just being hired to make them and being out in terms of, owning them, why don't we start making them? And if we own them, then the rights will revert back to us after the license period. And then we could, if this book is right, there will be a lot of places that will buy this special. And the only thing I would say the book was wrong about, and it wasn't wrong, but the magnitude in which this has occurred, the book didn't fully predict.
Yeah, it didn't
Who
foretell
would have
how
known,
huge
right? Yeah.
the opportunity was going to be for that.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very risky thing that we did for the first 3 or 4 years because it took a lot of time to make these things and then sell them. And by the way, there was a chance they wouldn't sell.
Right.
So we were very fortunate in that.
You had that at the beginning because, right, you invested a very large amount of money on a Tom Green special that didn't have a buyer at the time, right?
Well, yes, that's accurate. But at the same time we were doing the Tom Green special, we were doing 3, 4, 5, 6 others.
Okay.
So the Tom Green one is a great example that I use a lot because it was first,
right?
In terms of jumping without a net at that size. But one of the things, actually, I did another interview where I talked about Tom Green, and one of the people that I still work with to this day who was here at the time, it was really funny. He reminded me after the fact that we shot Tom Green, we had guaranteed all the money, we had spent the money to make it, and then we had done a deal 7 or 8 times bigger than what the Tom Green deal had been before Tom Green had even sold to Showtime, which I forgot until and obviously this was someone in our accounting department who couldn't sleep for probably 6 months
Right.
while we were doing all this, who was the guy who actually remembered it when he read the interview. But yeah, that it was all of these being done simultaneously. But even though we would sell them, very often we wouldn't sell them for more than it had cost to make them. So we would have to wait years for the license to end and then start putting them up on what the long tail had predicted would be this unlimited shelf space. And then it really took like 6, 7, 8 years for the money to start coming in that, justified the risks we had taken 5, 6 years earlier. So that's
a long time to wait.
Yeah. Luckily, we had a thriving, other businesses that were thriving that helped cash flow this and keep it all moving. It wouldn't have been possible without that. But it was a long time to wait, and not to be cheesy, it was worth the wait.
2014, you had a meeting with Hulu that completely changed your direction, because at that point, that was the meeting that kind of said that these things could be licensed over and over and put on these streaming platforms, right?
Yeah, that's accurate. And another way of saying it is that meeting at Hulu was when I knew 100% the long tail was right and the risks we had taken were correct.
One of the things that I was kind of impressed with, because I have a film background, so I am pretty much an expert at making a low-budget film because the resources are always so limited. So there was somebody who, the vice president of Showtime Content Acquisitions, had made a quote that said that your large-scale shows were really polished, they were very professional, and was that hard to do without really knowing what the capital was that you were working with? Because that's kind of impressive to have the ability to put on a really grand scale show that looks high budget where maybe it isn't. And I don't know if yours were or not. I don't know what your budgets were. But
the way we dealt with this, and this is a great question. I've never been asked this before. That's an absolutely phenomenal question. The way we dealt with that variable was also very risky. I've never talked about this before because no one's asked this question before. And to be completely honest with you, the way my brain works is like I make decisions and move on, and very rarely do I look backwards. So it takes a question like yours to make me realize something that I've completely forgotten about. But very good question. The way we dealt with this issue was we, in addition to all the other stuff I was saying about, we had to guarantee artists money, we had to pay to shoot the special and the crew and all that and rent the venue. We also invested very heavily in cameras and electronics and gear and communications and crew and staff. And what that did was, again, very risky in the beginning, but over time allowed us to basically bring the cost down. If it used to cost $500,000 to make a gorgeous special, what we were able to do was bring that cost down, to between $250 and $350, because we didn't have to rent anything, and we weren't losing money covering the overhead of the companies that we rented for the most part. So that's how we dealt with that variable.
And you weren't subbing out the work to another production company either, which would take a lot of the costs away.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, everything we've been doing up until this very second with distribution is just trying to make sure there are as few variables in between us and the person spending their money to hopefully enjoy that which we have produced.
Let's talk about some of the talent that you featured in your comedy specials. That you've been able to spot some talent quite early on in some of their careers and elevate their careers. Where do you think your eye for talent comes from, and have you ever tried stand-up yourself?
I've never tried stand-up in my entire life. The closest I ever came to it, and I'm really glad that I did this, was when I represented Dane. We were one night, a friend of ours was practicing his set. He was doing like a Kimmel or a Conan or something, I don't know. And he was performing at an open mic night. and Dane and I went to, see our friend and give him notes and support him and everything. And it was like a real like out of a movie, like real crappy open mic night, like 6 people in the room, maybe 3, I don't know, like just real bad at like a karaoke joint, real bad. And, at this time, I was watching Dane do his set back then. This is 10, 12 years ago. Every night practically, probably 4 or 5 nights a week. And I had large sections of his act memorized because I had seen it so much. And Dane said, hey, why don't you go up? I know you know some of my jokes. Why don't you try it? So I went up, and I would say my delivery and rhythms and patterns were almost identical to his because I had memorized them because I'd seen it so much. Mm-hmm. And even though there was only 3 to 6 people in the room, to say that I bombed would be a staggering understatement. So I can truthfully say I've never done stand-up, but I can also say I've been on stage telling jokes that when Dane said them, sold tens of thousands of tickets and were beloved by millions. But I learned a very valuable lesson from that, so I'm always glad that I did that. So that's the answer to that question. No, I've never done stand-up.
Okay.
And then the answer to the other question is, and this goes directly back to me being a manager, I always was able to tell, and this wasn't just me, this was any manager could do this, you could always tell if your clients were on the road towards, blowing up with quite accurate precision based on their touring. So, and a term I came up with was the city-on-city number. And basically, all it means is, if you have a client that, 3 years ago sold 80 tickets in Denver, and last year sold 300 tickets in Denver, and this year sold 2,000 tickets in Denver, mm-hmm. That was a very good indicator that your client was about to blow up and start to succeed. And you would see it, before anybody. Right. So I learned to really trust the touring data. So that's part of it. And then the other part of it is because all we do is comedy, there's a lot of companies that do comedy, but they do a lot of other things too. We're one of the few companies that only does comedy. So it's very easy to start to see patterns as to what the audience is liking. So those 2 pieces of information combined are how we've been able to do what we've done in terms of spotting people before they've done their first special.
When you're spotting talent or looking at those numbers, do some of those people, when you started that Hulu show coming to the stage that features some new and up-and-coming talent, did you bring on people that you had already been watching, or are these completely unknowns that were on that program?
So that's a great question, and I'm going to give you a very unsexy answer. Okay. I think a lot of people would answer this question by saying some sort of BS, which would be, we have people out there with, at the clubs every night and pounding the pavement every night and, searching for those great voices, high and low. That's what a lot of people would say.
That's what we hear a lot, yeah. So you're going to give us give us a straight answer?
Well, I'm going to give you the answer of what I do. Okay. I'm not saying other people are lying when they say that. They might be telling the truth. Sure. They probably are telling the truth. But what we do, and again, this goes back to my experience as a manager, I trust the agents and managers completely. And I know, there's a group of probably between, 30 and 60 agents and managers. That's a big gap. It's probably about 50 or 60 managers that I trust completely. And I know that if they sign somebody, these are people with families. These are people who are very busy, probably do 300-400 phone calls a day, over 1,000 emails a day. If they have decided to sign somebody, that means that they believe in that person, and statistically speaking, if they believe in that person, then I should believe in that person. So that is going back to what you brought up with coming to the stage. we're not out there at clubs looking for talent. We call those up to 50 agents and managers, and we say, or we send an email to them, and we say, we're doing another season of Coming to the Stage. Who do you believe in right now? And then we start getting, hundreds and hundreds of links, and then from those links, we dial down on 12 performers per season.
Let's move on to some new things that you're doing. You're going away from doing just comedy specials because now you are starting to do some original scripted comedies and comedy shows. You've done the History Channel's Join or Die with Craig Ferguson, Wild and Out on tour with Nick Cannon, and it looks like you have a show with Zac Efron, then Anthony Anderson's got a show. I was just wondering, what process do you use when you launch into scripted and unscripted comedies? How do you determine, which direction you're going to go and pick which projects you're going to do at which time? How does timing play into all that?
So this is going to sound real cheesy, but I mean, it all begins with the idea. So there has to be an idea that I believe in, first of all, and second of all, equal, if not more important, I think will sell. So, there has to be an idea, then, you got to work it out with the artist to make sure that the idea that the artist believes in is the idea that can sell, which is not always the case. And then you push forward as aggressively as possible. And just pray to God somebody wants to buy it and make it.
When you personally are producing these shows, can you tell us where your role kind of starts and ends? I mean, you're probably coming up with the ideas, but are you also involved in like writing the treatments and, there for the filming and that kind of thing? Where do you start and where do you end with this process?
So my role is very different on every show. There are some shows I am incredibly involved with and give pages and pages and pages of notes. And then there are some shows where I show up on set and nobody has any idea who I am. The reason that the same person can have the same job, but it's a very different show versus another show, is because some shows, when they come together, have pieces that are very experienced and, well done. And, I put the deal together. Maybe I sold the show. Maybe I did a lot of creative during the development phase. But once it's sold, there's a million showrunners out there who have 10 billion times the amount of experience that I do. And my job becomes supporting them and getting them what they need. So they don't need my notes. They need me to make sure I get them what they need. Then there's some other shows that come together and sell that might not have as experienced a showrunner, or might not have as experienced a producer. And then I have to be a lot more involved with the creative. And then there's a million examples in between those two, but that's between those two examples, that covers about 95% of my day-to-day responsibilities.
So you recently filmed a special with Bob Saget called 0 to 60, and he returned to Netflix in Fuller House. And you've worked with Bob back in 2013 on his That's What I'm Talking About. So how do you ensure that each special turns out differently?
Well, in terms of everything going on with a special, other than what the artist is saying and doing on stage, because that's up to the artist and we just trust the artist. Everything else, we make sure that the look is different. We make sure that the venue's different. In Bob's case, since 4 years has gone by, we obviously have all new cameras and all new editing bays and all that stuff. So, we have a lot of little tricks like that going on that we didn't have 4 years ago. I think the cameras we're using now, the lens of these cameras cost more than the entire camera 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay.
I mean that literally, by the way. And then I will also say this, which is probably not the most, beautiful, sweet, lovely thing for someone in an artistic field to say, but I truly believe the specials that work, and I know I'm sort of saying the obvious, but it's all about the artist. I mean, my main job is to just make sure that artist is comfortable and confident on stage. If the artist is in front of a red curtain or a blue curtain or a green curtain and they're insecure for some reason or frustrated for some reason, then it's going to be a bad show. So I'll get the artists whatever they want, and that's what I view to be my job. But in terms of, the specials that have worked, 99.9% of it is just everything that artist does on stage. And then the other person I would give a ton of credit to for stand-up specials who really don't get any credit or enough credit or whatever is the editor. Because the editor, everybody's always obsessed with the director or obsessed with the DP, and you should be. You should be obsessed with those jobs. But the editor is of equal importance to a stand-up special, and we try very hard to make sure we have the best of the best when it comes to editors. So that's the editor's not sitting there in Detroit while you're shooting, but when we're back in the office and in the Bay, that person really becomes the most important person other than the artist making that special. And I play a big part in, and I view this to be one of the most important things I do, is just making sure we're in business with all the right editors.
Are your editors on staff, or do you sub out, for each show? Is each show have its own editor?
It's both. So we have editors who are full-time, and then as we crew up or crew down, we'll hire people, or their jobs will end and they'll go find another job. Sometimes the artists have their own people, so we'll hire, we'll always hire the artist people if they have people they want us to hire. Okay. So it's a mix and match.
Okay. One thing I always wondered with these comedy specials, when we see them on TV or even on streaming, who comes to who to get this off the ground? Like, say, and Craig Ferguson or Bob Saget, they want to do a comedy special. Do you come to them, or do they come looking for you?
Every special is different. Craig Ferguson, the first special we did, his agent called me. Bob Saget's first special, his agent called me. Or I called his agent, something like that. This last special with Bob called me. So I'd say 85% of these are, I talk to agents and managers every day.
Okay.
And I find out who's out there, who's ready to go up again, who's up and coming, and it's just a very, 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 very organic process. Organic to the point where it would be very hard. If we went through our resume, I would have a very tough time remembering probably how at least 30% of them originated, maybe even 50%.
But typically, it sounds like mostly they're reaching out. They're looking to do a special. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and I mean, it also depends on the level. So for up-and-comers, or for people, I should say, who have never done a special, they're reaching out to me.
Okay.
For the people that have done lots of specials, I'm stalking their agents and managers to get the opportunity to work with their clients. So that probably represents 80% of the process.
What comic has been the most fun for you to work with?
There's nobody who's been the most fun. There's been, we've done about 150 of these. There's only 2 artists that I didn't like working with. So out of the 150, 148 of them I liked working with to some degree, meaning I either liked working with them or I loved working with them. Tom Segura, truly an absolute pleasure to be around every single second. We just did Christina P., his wife's, that premiered yesterday on Netflix. She's the best. Ali Wong is, just wonderful. If I was looking, Bob is the greatest. Jim Gaffigan is, I rarely spend any time with Gaffigan where I'm not walking out of the room at some point, with tears in my eyes. I've been laughing.
Awesome.
He's just so funny. And yes, he's funny on stage. But a lot of comedians are, they're not as funny off stage as they are on stage. But, I mean, Jim is just so funny. Getting to work with him, Mike Birbiglia, I mean, the guy, Mike Birbiglia is not like a goofball cracking jokes, but, I mean, you're literally around a genius. Like, everything he says, the way he looks at life, the questions he asks, like, you're with a genius. So there's a lot of that kind of thing, going on too, where, it's just, it's just very cool. It's just very cool to, to know these people so well and get to work with them and every now and then get to hang out with them. I've been doing this almost 20 years. I still sometimes can't believe, this kind of thing is happening.
For 20 years, you have been doing this, and that's why I wonder, was there ever a time in your career where maybe you were starstruck working with somebody? Did you ever have one of those moments like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm in the room with so-and-so? Or has it always just been kind of your business?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'll give you an honest answer to your question, even though it's not a very popular answer. About 6 months before everything blew up on Bill Cosby, we were working on a project with him. And I met with him twice at his house. He called me a couple times, and I remember. I'll never forget seeing on the caller ID Bill Cosby. That is definitely the most. And then literally the week before we were about to start pitching the show, everything blew up. So that was the timing on that. And then, so that's the number one tippy top of being starstruck.
Sure.
But a number two, a little less controversial, would be actually, believe it or not, Dennis Miller. Dennis Miller for me was, he was my weekend update when I was a kid. So when I'm laying on my parents' carpet in the living room watching SNL, it was him. I love working with Aziz. I love working with Kevin Hart, but I didn't know who the hell they were when I was 12.
Right, exactly.
So working with Dennis, it was funny. The first time I worked with Dennis, I definitely was a little starstruck. I got to admit. And then we worked on a project with him a couple years later, where we took a project out to sell, and he and I had to go to like 6 or 7 meetings in one day. And Dennis asked if he could drive to the meetings with me, and I literally spent the entire day driving to meetings with him, just me and him in my car. And this was about 2-3 years ago, I think. And that one of my favorite days of my whole career.
That's cool. Because, we are called Fancounters, and so I'm not necessarily sure that you possibly have your own fans that you've had some freaky encounters with, but just equally as exciting are your fan encounters, and Dennis Miller is a great example of that.
Yeah, both of them. Bill Cosby,
they're
legends.
Have you had any, freaky encounters with any fans of yours?
I mean, I don't have fans, but I do have, and I mean, I can't even believe this is true. I can't even believe I'm saying this, but I mean, there are people, there are comedy nerds, and I'm a comedy nerd, so I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. But there are comedy nerds who I talk to every day on Facebook, and a couple times now. It happened for the first time, I think, last year. We were in Cleveland shooting Tom Papa, and after the show, I was walking out, and someone came up to me who I'd only known on Facebook, and it was a pretty surreal.
A little freaky?
And that's happened probably 3 or 4 times since. But no, I literally, like I said, I get emails and Facebooks. Okay. I'd say between 1 and 10 times a day now from strangers that just want to talk about comedy. So that is that's definitely really, 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 really cool.
Probably depending on their message is whether or not you respond to them or not.
I would say I respond to 99 out of every 100 emails or Facebook Messenger.
Oh, that's good. That's
Cool.
great.
Yeah.
Now,
It's important. It's you know, a lot of these people are aspiring comedians, and I just think it's very important that you know, it's funny. Woz of Apple fame. I read this thing he said where he said patting somebody on the back at the right moment could bring about like the thing which makes your company become a multi-billion-dollar company. And he was like, you know, it's just a pat on the back at the right moment. And I'm butchering this. I don't remember exactly what he said, but a pat on the back at the right moment, you know, can change that person's life and even your own. And as somebody myself who's received many pats on the back when I needed it, I just think it's very important to engage, especially up-and-coming comics, as they're trying to figure out a lot of stuff, especially if they don't live in L.A. or New York and don't have an agent or manager. This is a pretty wacky business, getting wackier by the month.
Elizabeth and I teased this next topic in our opening because it's something that we're both really interested in. Obviously, when I was a kid, Johnny Carson was still on the air. And there's a new comedy coming out called There's Johnny. Now, from what I read, it was supposed to have already premiered on NBC Universal's comedy streaming service. But since they're shutting down, I guess the show's looking for a new home. So can you tell us anything more about this, where we might be able to see this There's Johnny comedy?
Yes. The good news is it's going to be on Hulu next month.
Ooh, okay.
The bad news is I'm not allowed to tell you yet what day.
Okay.
But it will be November 2017 on Hulu.
That is fabulous.
Fantastic.
Paul Reiser is the writer. I've seen Tony Danza's in it. So, I mean, right there you have two people that are like geniuses. And
Who plays Johnny? Or is it clips of Johnny Carson?
There are. I gotta be so careful answering these questions because I don't want anybody mad at me. I can confirm that there are clips of Johnny Carson.
Okay.
Short of that, I would encourage you to read it somewhere else.
Okay.
no problem.
We understand.
But preferably when Paul explains it.
Okay.
We are very excited to see it, so we'll definitely be tuning in.
I'm as biased as I can get, so take this with a grain of salt, but it's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, we both are very excited. Yeah.
So another show that was kind of teased online, it's called Spooning with Zac Efron. It was supposed to be on MTV. That's a traveling food show. Is that got an air date yet?
So that show changed networks. So it's no longer on MTV. It's no longer called Spooning With, and we will be announcing soon what has become of that show, which, similar to There's Johnny, is definitely a positive.
Awesome. I've assumed that you filmed several episodes so far, right?
Yeah. We've definitely been filming quite a bit.
When you talk about things changing networks of where you originally thought your project was going to be, is it kind of more than meets the eye to get a show from maybe a concept to actually finding a home to air it?
So it's another great question. So this is what I'll say to that. And if this doesn't answer the question, I'll try again. But this is what I would say. This is the best way I can answer it. Like I keep saying, I've been doing this 19 years. Before 2017, the amount of times that I sold a show to a network and then that show aired on a different network was zero.
Yeah.
Never happened.
That's what I would expect your answer to be.
In 2017, I'm sorry?
I was to say that's what I thought the answer. That's what I was expecting it to be. That zero. It never changed.
In 2017, I am dealing with this 3 times.
Wow. Wow.
One of which is There's Johnny going from CISO to Hulu. One of them is the Efron thing going from MTV to somewhere else. And there's a third one that I'm working on right now, which has also changed networks.
Wow. Very unusual.
Yep.
Well, maybe, and that's the sign of what's
to put
to come.
it mildly. Yeah, it definitely is, and it's a good thing. It's actually a great thing.
You've worked with so many amazing, talented, brilliant people in their comedy specials, from Foxworthy to Jim Gaffigan. You mentioned Aziz Ansari before, Rob Schneider. Do you have a list of comedians on your radar that you want to work with that you haven't at this point?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Tracy Morgan. Man, oh man, does he make me laugh? Sarah Silverman, I am dying to work with. I've met her a few times, of course, but I've never produced for her. I would kill to work with either of them. And then, there's a cliched, Chappelle. I'd love to also work with Chris Rock. Oh my God. That would be very surreal. Very, very surreal. And again, I've been around him many times. I've met him. I've talked to him. But I've never produced for him. I mean, that would be the greatest thing in the world. But, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of specials that I watch, of course, which we did not produce. Mm-hmm. And, Tracy Morgan's, I've seen it twice. I mean, it's just absolutely brilliant. He's the cliched. He's the guy I can make the cliched statement of that. Him reading the phone book, I'm sure he would be making me laugh with my ribs hurting.
How easy is it for you to just make the call and say, hey, Tracy, how about making a special?
It's not easy at all. First of all, believe it or not, we actually have competitors who are very talented and good at what they do as well as we are. A. B, relationships are a huge part of this game. And, Tracy did a stand-up special before we were making stand-up specials. He had a good experience making it and wanted to work with the same company again, which, good for him. He should. That's the right thing to do. So same thing for, a lot of these guys is, there's an artist who I wanted to work with very, very badly recently. And she had not done a special in decades, and she's literally hiring the company that did her last special that has not made a stand-up special since her last special, which I think is close to 20 years ago. But am I bummed out I don't get to work with her? Yeah, absolutely, completely bummed out about it. Do I respect the fact that she was loyal and wants to be comfortable with the people that she's trusting her material with? Yeah, I get
definitely.
it. And by the way, there's all these artists that hire us over and over and over again. We're shooting Gaffigan's 4th special for us. I mean, I think he's done 6 or 7 specials. But next week, we are working for the 4th time with Gaffigan.
Okay.
And, yeah, so how could I fault any artist for not wanting to be loyal to their production company, when Jim keeps hiring us over and over again and, all these other people. So, yeah, am I bummed out? Yes. Do I respect their decision and totally get it? Absolutely.
Sure. Brian, I want to thank you very much for joining us on this episode of Fancounters. Like I said, it's been kind of a completely different thing because you're producing these things instead of acting in them and that kind of thing. So learning about sort of the business end for me has been quite fascinating.
So what's up next?
Thank you.
What's up next for you and Comedy Dynamics? And what's coming out that you want us to watch for? And where would you like them to find you on social media or connect with your business online?
Yeah, I mean, Facebook is the best way to connect because obviously it's just a great way for two-way communication, and you can follow us and see what we're up to, and reach out and ask questions and all that stuff. So I'm a big fan of Facebook. We just broke 600,000 followers.
Woo-hoo.
So
and is that Facebook you personally or Comedy Dynamics?
Comedy Dynamics. Okay. Comedy Dynamics. I'm hovering right around 5,000.
Okay.
No, but 600,000, that's amazing. That's excellent. Congratulations.
Yeah. And we just started like a little over 2 years ago. So we're pretty jazzed about that.
For sure.
And I mean, as it relates to what we have coming up, like I said, we're shooting Gaffigan next week. We have a very We have a very full slate between now and the end of the year. I think we're shooting another 8 or 9, maybe 10 specials. We're working with Dimitri Martin again this year, who's also, oh my God, I mean, one of my favorites, just absolute genius. We're very lucky. We started acquiring films this year. We've been going to all the festivals, starting with Sundance and Slam Dance in January, and we've been buying a lot of movies. So, that's also something we're very excited about. In February, we're going to be releasing our first film ever in theaters.
What is that called?
It's called Poop Talk. It's all about poop. But it's just full of, some of the greatest comedians of our time, like, Kumail and Nick Swartstrom, and whose name I can never pronounce, so I don't know why I picked his name of everybody in the movie. But anyway, but that's a very new thing for us, putting movies in theaters, and just movies in general. Like I said, we just released our first film in August, so this has all been very, very new for us.
Excellent.
And a lot of fun.
Well, congratulations to you on a great career so far, and certainly we're going to keep our eyes on what's going on at Comedy Dynamics coming forward.
Yeah, we really do appreciate you coming on Fan Counters with us.
Thank you. I mean, thank you both so much. And I just got to say, I do these from time to time, and there's a lot, really some great questions, and I really appreciate the time you obviously spent doing some research. You literally reminded me of 2 things I have not thought of in a long, long time.
That's Nick. He's our fantastic producer who does all the research. Nick just likes to know all those little ins and outs. So
I'm definitely, take a great interest in not only the business, but just trying to absorb as much information. Yeah. So it's been very entertaining, Brian.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, and I'm a little jealous. I'm a big fan of the Midwest, so good for you that you're in Madison, one of my favorite towns.
Well, it's cold and rainy.
One of the greatest and craziest nights of my life. 1996. Homecoming. I was there for that randomly, so I have very good memories of your town.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You bet.
Bye.
And there you have it. So now we can watch There's Johnny next month. We have the answer to our question.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Me too. If you want to follow us on social media, and we encourage you to do that, go to our Facebook page at Fancounters. You can go to facebook.com/Fancounters. Like our page. Help us reach the triple digits. That would be awesome.
We would love that.
And you can also email us at hello@fancounters.com. Make sure you tell us about your celebrity encounter so we can feature that on an upcoming episode.
Yeah, looking forward to hearing from y'all.
All right. Have a great week. We'll talk to you next Friday.
See ya.